Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome aboard our stream today. So fantastic to have you here. Today we're really going to be exploring just a couple of comic books that are upcoming and a few disparate pillars of Marvel's publishing line, but we're going to explore them in tons of depth today. So we're going to start off by really diving into the Amazing Spider-Man, especially as we're headed towards the end of the Zeb Wells run, and we're starting to get a couple more previews about the upcoming 8 Deaths of Spider-Man with Joe Kelly. That's going to be a ton of fun, especially as Joe Kelly is already a seasoned Marvel veteran. Also, one big thing that's going to be a little bit new on this stream that we really haven't featured in a ton of depth on previous streams is this Venom War event happening in terms of the rest of Marvel's publishing line. Frankly, I actually fell behind on a couple issues of Venom. This morning, I was able to get back in touch with the series, and man, did I think it was able to follow up on so many of the plot threads from Free Comic Book Day exceptionally well with this future version of Eddie's son Dylan running around. That is such an intriguing comic book. We've been following Venom sort of at a distance for actually like years in terms of the channel. So I am just thrilled that Marvel is investing more resources towards that book and is actually like spearheading it towards like a big, massive event series. I think that's a really interesting direction. Also, the other two things we're really going to explore is the X-Men comics. So not only do we have the main X-Men publishing line that I think is just really firing across all cylinders right now, whether it be Cyclops' main X-Men book, the Uncanny X-Men book. Frankly, I'm even really just enamored with NYX2. I think that's probably one of the best sleeper titles in the line so far. It's also exciting too because we're still not done with the first round of From the Ashes comics either. We still have Eve Ewing and Carmen Carnero's exceptional X-Men, and man, I think that book has the potential to just be absolutely fantastic. We've talked about that one ad nauseum. Carmen Carnero is a great artist. I think we'll be previewing some covers of hers across this stream, but I just think the amount of detail that she's able to render on like Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost's face is just so staggering, and it really helps me suspend my disbelief and really buy into the comic book. And we haven't even seen some of those interiors yet, so frankly, I think we're in for something really, really fascinating. I quickly want to talk about our last video review for the second issue of Phoenix. I love this comic book. I thought we had a really great video review. Didn't do as well as I wanted it to, so I would encourage everybody to go check it out if you haven't already. Watching Jean Grey operate like in outer space and seeing her answer all these distress calls is so interesting, especially as sort of a catalyst and coda to the last volume of X-Men. We like slowly got to watch Jean Grey become resurrected towards the end of the Krakoan line of comics. So seeing her in full force manifest her full powers, I think, is so fascinating. Also, we talked in the review about how many elements of continuity this book is bringing forward, whether it be the Black Order, the Universal Church of Truth, or this really interesting character of Pericus featured in the background, having all these duels with the character of Adani. We got the preview on the first teaser page for the first issue of Phoenix that Adani might be the big bad for this Phoenix comic. So I think it's so interesting to sort of watch her manifest her powers and age with each individual issue of that comic book title. Also, so fascinating to see Jean actually go up and fight against the Black Order. I was so invested in those Jonathan Hickman comics from the Avengers when the Black Order first appeared, and I just think it's so interesting watching them engage with battle over with Jean Grey. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome you over to our stream today. Thank you so much for joining us. We have so many exciting things to go ahead and discuss. We talked in our intro sequence about how we're really going to be focusing on some individual pillars of Marvel's publishing line. Each and every week, we reinforce the fact that From the Ashes has been absolutely spectacular in terms of the X-Men. The Krakoan line of comics was such a wonderful period for Marvel's mutants, and I really thought that them launching a new comic book line with such a low premise, with the X-Men sort of scattered across the globe and trying to rebuild their operation, I didn't think it would be quite as interesting as it has been, but seeing all these disparate writers pick up the pieces from Krakoa and try and thread a new narrative has been so fascinating. In just a few moments here, we're actually going to go ahead and preview the upcoming issue of Spider Man. I think Marvel's Amazing Spider Man is just in a tremendous place. I think for years, Zeb Wells has been telling these really long term storylines with various characters across Spider Man's Rogues Gallery. Today, we are actually going to go ahead and preview the upcoming 56th issue for the Amazing Spider Man, which also functions as the 950th legacy issue. This is going to be a massive anniversary issue over for Peter Parker and just the Amazing Spider Man's publishing line. This preview is coming in over from comicbookdispatch.com. I can see very clearly that the cover is rendered from John Romita Jr. as readers get a tease of these two figures coming to blows here. We also had the chance to look at some upcoming previews for future Spider-Man issues on previous streams, and we did see that it looks like Tombstone is actually going to end up in prison with Spider-Man visiting him. For me, this is really interesting because there's been so many chance encounters between the really deadly and organized crime character of Tombstone versus Spider-Man, and there's been so many moments where these two are supposed to come to blows, but end up finding, common ways that actually bring them together as friends instead of foes. This was also seen as a part of Marvel's Gang Wars storyline, which frankly, I don't think there was enough coverage for across the internet. Watching Tombstone and Peter Parker team up to fight some of the other organized crime characters in his Rogues Gallery was such a blast. And it also did a really fantastic job seeding this upcoming storyline that's going to close out Zeb Wells' epic run on Spider-Man. Without further ado, let's check out Amazing Spider-Man 56 and see just how nasty Tombstone's fight over with Peter Parker gets. Want to thank Comic Book Dispatch for posting this one. And let's check out the solicit first. This is a crazy issue and we need as much context as possible. Tombstone returns in a special oversized legacy, issue 950. The newest kingpin of crime will show his power to the other gangs of New York City by publicly killing Spider-Man. And of course, the easiest way to get Spidey is to kidnap Peter Parker. On top of our oversized main adventure, this issue... Let's see if I can talk today. This issue includes some new classic stories. As you can see, this looks like a really big issue. It's coming in at 64 pages instead of the usual 20-something. It's also coming in at a hefty $7.99 here. So I'm thinking John Romita Jr. is the artist that kicks off the issue here as it's set over in Mozambique. I am loving how ambitious Zeb Wells is getting in terms of the story direction and the way that he's able to introduce both Tombstone and Wilson Fisk over to the comic book. We can see these two characters operating alongside each other next to some lions and a Jeep. Wilson Fisk says over to Tombstone, "Take a look, Alonzo." With Tombstone responding, "It's Tombstone when I'm working, Mr. Fisk. You're on vacation, not me." Yeah, I think in terms of the dialogue, Zeb Wells has always been great at writing two gangsters sparring back and forth between each other. And also, this next image is just absolutely horrifying as we get to see a lion with a cub in its mouth just bleeding. We can see Wilson Fisk responding, "A cub sired by his predecessor. He's recently taken over a pride. Resources are limited." Tombstone saying in the background here, "That's messed up." Tevya says, "I still think this book is a train wreck, but I'm glad you are enjoying this book." Thank you so much, Tevya. I think this preview in particular for issue 56 is just absolutely interesting. Just the scenario that Wells was able to introduce for Wilson Fisk and Tombstone is a ton of fun. Also, I think John Romita Jr., one of his best strengths as an artist is rendering these like big and bulky characters that can wield just a huge amount of expressions on the page. And the art shifts. I'm not sure who this next artist is on the issue, but watching She Hulk talk about some of the legal aspects of the Marvel Universe over with Spider Man, I think is quite endearing, especially as it sets up Spider Man trying to ask She Hulk about pursuing some upcoming legal adventures regarding the character of Tombstone. To which She Hulk actually responds to Spider Man that she's still looking into the case involving the character of Ned Leeds. So once again here, I think this is some super fascinating long-term plotting for the Amazing Spider-Man. Also, I really love this super naturalistic sense of artwork. It's reminding me of one of the artists on She-Hulk, but I can't quite place it right now. This next sequence actually features Peter Parker heading over to Paul and Mary Jane's house to catch up with them for dinner. Frankly, I thought this was yet another really beautiful, naturalistic moment for these characters. The artwork on this page is beautiful, and the way that it's able to tell a super cohesive story almost in one page, I think, is also just really, really beautiful. Watching Zeb Wells write a storyline involving Peter Parker and Mary Jane not as a couple, where the two aren't at each other's throats, I think is really beautiful as well. I think steering Mary Jane away from Peter Parker and exploring what's left of their friendship and relationship is one of the most like adult ways I've ever seen a writer combat or just take on some of these plot threads in Spider-Man. So I really hope Zeb Wells continues in this direction. I think nearly like each and every scene in this issue is so wonderful. When I look up information across the Amazing Spider-Man across the internet, I am just so taken with this series. Even if you're not super invested in the relationship between Peter Parker and some of the other ancillary characters across this series, I still find that there's a ton of other stuff in the Amazing Spider-Man, like She-Hulk talking about Ned Leeds, the characters of Tombstone and Wilson Fisk working together. There is so much here aside from the romance between Peter and Mary. And I just have a hard time, figuring out why more fans aren't latching on to the super ambitious direction that Zeb Wells has taken on with these characters. Plus all the background and lead up to this story that happened not only in the Gang War comic book, but in the very early issues of Spider-Man has really made this final story arc from Zeb Wells to seem so epic. So I am very excited for the future of this series. I am thrilled to see hopefully what Zeb Wells is taking on next over at Marvel Comics. And in the meantime, The Amazing Spider-Man is keeping the same numbering even as it shifts over to a new creative team. So let's go ahead and see what is next in store for Marvel's ongoing Amazing Spider-Man series. We have Marvel's November Solicitations coming up here over from Adventures in Poor Taste. Full November 2024 Marvel Comics Solicitations, 8 Deaths of Spider-Man, and more. This one is coming in from David Brooke at Adventures in Poor Taste. Okay, so here it is. This is the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man storyline that is actually the next following story of Amazing Spider-Man after this big Tombstone epic. Give me just one moment here. I'm going to go ahead and load everything up, and then we're going to preview the upcoming solicitations for the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. Something about Adventures in Poor Taste website is not quite loading like it should today. Okay, well, that's loading. Let's go ahead and check out the solicit for one of the first issues here. So I believe this is Joe Kelly's first issue on The Amazing Spider-Man. This is chapter 61 here. This introduces Doctor Doom towards the Spider-Man mythology as well. Super interesting thing to note right now about Doctor Doom is towards the end of the Blood Hunt storyline, it looks like he's taken on the role of Sorcerer Supreme. And he's enlisted Spider-Man to work alongside him. This is a super interesting new status quo that's really shifted away from nearly everything Zeb Wells has been doing across his main run here. Let's go ahead and check out the solicit to see what Joe Kelly has in store for Amazing Spider-Man. The 8 deaths of Spider-Man begin. The world has changed, and Doctor Doom is Sorcerer Supreme. But he has no plans to spend his time like his predecessor. Each year, Doctor Strange would use every ounce of his power and experience to save the world from an evil god and his scions. This year, Doom is delegating this task to Spider-Man. The leader of Latveria has given Spider-Man a new magic-powered suit and 8 extra lives with which to save the world. So this is Amazing Spider-Man 61. We already said it's written by Joe Kelly. It features art and cover from Ed McGuinness and a variant from Gleb Melnikov. Yeah, it's super interesting to see all of the plot threads starting to come together here. I don't think we really have anything in the core Amazing Spider-Man that's setting this up, but I'm really intrigued with all these instances of plot in the background. For me right now, one of the biggest things that I'm not sure how we're going to see play out is how Spider-Man is going to utilize some of his additional 8 lives. One thing the solicit does is preview at the brand new suit for Spider-Man, which seemingly comes into play towards the 62nd issue of the comic book. Thankfully, we also have the solicit available for the 62nd issue. This came out around San Diego Comic-Con as well from Marvel. So this time we have just a full solicit and just a little bit more context as to what the creative team is bringing here. Amazing Spider-Man 62, also written by Joe Kelly, featuring art and this beautiful cover from Ed McGuinness. I guess one of the elements that's kind of sticking around from the previous Amazing Spider-Man to this new series, aside from the numbering, is the artwork from Ed McGuinness. He drew some of my very favorite issues from the last run of the series. I'm super excited to see how he's going to adapt to some of the slapstick humor from Joe Kelly. The 8 deaths of Spider-Man continue. Spider-Man, 1 death down, faces the scion of Sidorak. Okay, so we have the Sidorak referenced here. My mind is already heading towards Juggernaut, who's actually referenced in the very next sentence. That's right. The god Spider-Man faces is the patron of Juggernaut. Juggernaut is about 10 times more powerful than Spider-Man with only a fraction of Sidorak's power. To quote a wise philosopher, uh-oh. Yeah, I wonder how many lives Spider-Man is going to have to use for the character of Juggernaut. I believe Juggernaut right now is operating right now in terms of the main adjectiveless X-Men book in terms of what Cyclops has going on over at Merle, Alaska. Let's see. Let's go ahead and catch up over with some of these comments. Nicholas Lopez Herrera says, Paul needs to go. You know, I actually like Paul. I think Paul is a really interesting vehicle to get readers introduced to some interesting commentary in The Amazing Spider-Man. Tevye Smoka says, I just hope Paul goes away and never comes back. Yeah, I think Paul helps position Mary Jane in a different place in terms of The Amazing Spider-Man, aside from just being a love interest with Peter Parker. Now, in terms of what you guys are talking about, I think one really interesting element here is how Joe Kelly is going to treat the relationship between Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and some of the other love interests. I would love to see, Peter Parker continue his relationship with the nurse over at Ravencroft. I thought that was such a lovely issue from Zeb Wells and Emilio Laiso that we got in the last chapter of Amazing Spider-Man. And also, I think Paul is just a really fantastic character. He's been around for a couple years. I would love to see Joe Kelly maybe write some stories that collide Peter Parker and his new love interest with Mary Jane, and the character of Paul as well. Especially in the lead up to the Scribbleman story where Kamala Khan, died. I think there's a ton of just warm feelings I have towards that character. I find myself even more invested in Paul as Zebwell's Spider-Man run has continued. Let's see. Let me double check if we have any more issues of The Amazing Spider-Man to talk about. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and do it for today. One of my favorite things about what Joe Kelly is doing on The Amazing Spider-Man is just the simple fact that he's continuing the numbering. One of the things about superhero comics that can keep me sort of at a distance or at an arm's length is when I feel like superhero comics just continually reboot themselves again and again and again. And for me, I sort of get alienated at a certain point because I am reading these comic books across different writers and different creators, contributing towards them. And the idea of Marvel just dropping off on some plot threads and rebooting things from square one is just absolutely horrifying. I love it when the publisher keeps really close attention to continuity. Okay, I also want to go ahead and read this comment from Nicholas Lopez Herrera. First of all, let's go ahead and read what Tevye says. Tevye, I will go ahead and check out your solicitation stream in just a few moments, probably when we're done streaming here. Nicholas Lopez Herrera says, yeah, Michelle, it's lovely, that's true, but what was done to Spider-Man with One More Day, it's criminal. Like the soft reboot was fine, but they kept him apart from his wife for decades now. I know a lot of people are upset about One More Day, and in fact, I don't think One More Day is a really phenomenal storyline, but what I do really like is Brand New Day, because Brand New Day took on a younger, fresher Peter Parker, and that was really where we got to see writers like, Zeb Wells and Joe Kelly really sort of work with a very younger, like a fresher Peter Parker character. I think that comic book did so many just fantastic creative things for the future of that ongoing series. And even though I hate some of the, broad plot implications for One More Day, I think it really helped the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. It really seems like Marvel is trying to keep Peter Parker as a younger character, and the idea of sticking him with just one romantic love interest feels like it just way limits the plot. So the idea that writers like Zeb Wells just really push Peter Parker towards some other love interests, I think is super refreshing. I really want to see Amazing Spider-Man stay in that direction. I want to see them move away from Mary Jane and just explore what's next for this character. Nicholas Lopez Herrera says, yes, I like Brand New Day. It was great, but no one is young forever. It's time he gets back on track with MJ again for me anyway. Yeah, I feel like I've had this conversation, in my comments section across so many videos. Or here, let's see what AfroSF has to say. I don't think AfroSF, falls in some of the same line of thinking. He says, greeting Arakko Braddock, even my cynical self will admit that One More Day was good. I kind of like some of the conversations between Peter and Mephisto in One More Day. I definitely thought that they were super, super heavy-handed. That being said, though, that storyline is super, super dramatic, and I think John Michael Straczynski is really, really good at writing dialogue. But the very next issue of Brand New Day, like the first one where we're introduced to the very, very young Peter Parker, is just a phenomenal storyline. And it's so haunting to see Peter lose his relationship with Mary and the very next day end up as like a single bachelor with some of his, long dead friends now alive, like Harry Osborn. I think The Amazing Spider-Man has probably upticked in quality since that point pretty consistently, actually. Tevye says, personally for me, I've been saying for an entire decade that Peter Parker and Mary Jane should move forward with their marriage and have daughter Mayday Parker's Spider-Girl exist in the main Marvel universe. Again, I think this is an interesting conversation, and I think, Tevye, I've even told you directly that if Marvel decided that they would 100% embrace a Mayday Parker Spider-Girl comic book, like if they said The Amazing Spider-Man now features Mayday Parker, I would be all in from day one. But I don't know if Marvel has an interest in continuing to publish that for like years and years and years. So it would probably be a very temporary status quo, and eventually they would probably just, reboot it to what the Amazing Spider-Man is now, with the very young Peter Parker character. Nicholas Lopez Herrera, I like the idea that Mephisto played a part on the creation of the Green Goblin, but I think it was too far with the idea that it was just a demon and not Norman. In terms of what's going on with Peter Parker and especially with Norman Osborn, I think Zeb Wells has just been absolutely obliterating that arena. The way that he's been able to craft such a solid foundation and relationship between Peter and Norman across his run has made the current Amazing Spider-Man ongoing absolutely just amazing for me as a reader. AfroSF says, we have the new Ultimate Universe for an older Peter Parker with a wife and children. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. I think the older version of Peter Parker with the relationship is very well established in terms of the Ultimate Universe. And, we also talk about this ad nauseum on so many of our streams, but I can't wait to see the Ultimate Spider-Man team up with characters like the Ultimate X-Men, who you can see right there if I'm pointing at the right direction. I think it's going to be so much fun to watch him team up with like Japanese high schoolers and really just go off in some different directions, which is frankly what I want to see for the franchise as a whole. Tevye Smoka. So Tevye thinks this is confusing because Ultimate Spider-Man is outselling the main Amazing Spider-Man book right now. That's a great point. You know what, Tevye? That is a fantastic point. Oftentimes we argue about like the semantics of some of these comic books, but the fact that you're actually giving me some sales data provides like an additional argument and some insight. But I understand why Ultimate Spider-Man is selling better than the main book, and frankly, I think that's because it's a brand new series. There's probably a lot more people who are still invested by the 8th issue as opposed to Amazing Spider-Man's 50-something chapter. I was looking at sales data for the Amazing Spider-Man's like early days, and I realized that those dark web issues of Amazing Spider-Man sold like crazy. I think part of it is because there was a lot of hype around Peter Parker's clone, Chasm. Plus, that book was really early in terms of its run, and there was a lot of marketing towards it too. In that sense, it's really bold of Marvel to continue with the numbering from the previous Amazing Spider-Man instead of just rebooting it to a number 1. They were probably so tempted to reboot it instead of keeping with the same numbering. And I wonder if Joe Kelly's run is going to be able to amass some of those same sales numbers with issue 60 instead of issue 1. That was a great point, Tevye. Appreciate you bringing that over on the stream. Also, I love the comments. If anybody has anything they want to add, please feel free to go ahead and chime in here. I was trying to use a few moments ago. I was trying to use Ultimate Spider-Man as the springboard to talk about the future of Ultimate X-Men. Frankly, that transition point is gone, but we're going to talk about Ultimate X-Men anyway because it's a book that I am super, super excited about at Marvel. This is probably one of my like top 3 comic books, if not my absolute favorites here. It looks like issue 6 is going to preview the finale of what Peach Momoko is going to bring in here for this very first story. One of my favorite parts about Ultimate X-Men as like an ongoing series, it's how it's very steadily able to introduce itself within the wider meta nature of the Ultimate Universe without directly commenting on it as of right now. It feels right now like the main Ultimates title, like the main Ultimate Spider-Man title, are way more enveloped in the overall Ultimate Universe surrounding the character of the Maker as well as the Maker's Council. But I really feel that at any moment, Ultimate X-Men can also get ensnared into some of that drama as well. We keep seeing some of these Ultimate X-Men characters manifest their powers in ways that are almost deadly. For instance, the character of Hisako Ichiki Armor manifested her armor ability during a car crash. And what happens so often in this title is that there's some bystanders who see these mutants able to flex on some of their powers, and it ends up spreading across the earth. So at some point, our Ultimate X-Men are going to attract members of the Makers Council and maybe the rest of the Ultimate Universe as well. For the time being, let's see what Peach Momoko is bringing for the end of the first arc on Ultimate X-Men issue 6. By the way, big thank you over to David Brooke and Adventures in Poor Taste for posting all this stuff so incredibly quick. The action-packed finale of the first arc. Armor, Maystorm, and the rest of the team hunt down the mysterious Shadow. But is this group of scrappy teens prepared to face true darkness? And don't miss the reveal of the final member of the group on the last page. Man, that is so exciting to hear that there's one last member of the Ultimate X-Men. This book has been slowly introducing some of the other cast members in very subtle ways across the comic book series. I can't quite tell who it is. I'm really thinking that maybe the last member joining the team could be Surge, but as we'll preview on an upcoming cover of Ultimate X-Men, it looks like there's quite a lot of animosity between figures like Maystorm and Surge, so I'm wondering if it could potentially be somebody else. This cover is so cool. It's almost like a movie poster or a movie collage. We have Hisako and the character of Maystorm riding this motorcycle, Mori and Natsu on the side, Surge, and the mysterious Shadow character, as well as the ultimate Nico Minoru. So man, we are only 6 issues in, but there's a staggering amount of plot threads here. Let's see what AfroSF has to say about Ultimate X-Men. I managed to persuade a 20-year-old old woman into anime and manga to buy Ultimate X-Men by showing her Peach Momoko's art and telling her what the story was about. She didn't know the comic existed. I am so happy you are able to spread the good word about this series. Have you heard? Ultimate X-Men exists, and it's fantastic. I've tried to get some of my friends who read only a few comic books into this series as well. I think this is totally the bridge that could make like a really hardcore comic book reader. I'm so happy to hear you say that. Let's preview the full creative team. Peach Momoko is both writing and drawing this series. We also have additional script adaptation from Zach Davison, letters from VC's Travis Lanham, and that really epic Jim Steranko-esque cover for the 6th issue was also coming in from Peach Momoko too. As you can see, this issue opens with a really settled page with our characters seemingly at school, really talking across a basketball arena here. But the trio right now of both Nico, Hisako, and Maystorm are actually talking about the mysterious cult hinted at in the last issue that they believe the mysterious Shadow character might be involved in. So already, I feel like so many of the pieces of Ultimate X-Men are coming together really quickly. And also, another really interesting thing to say about this preview is that Peach Momoko just really presents some of this in-depth plot material in super understated ways. These characters are talking about like mysterious, shadowy cults in the middle of school. So I am loving just the interesting scenarios Momoko has been able to implement and the incredibly understated way that she captures, for instance, Nico opening up this book about the mysterious cult instead of showing these characters like locked in in-depth conversation. I think some of the framing and just the decisions that Peach Momoko makes with the camera across some of these panels is absolutely amazing. This element of Hisako's Omamori, this amulet that she has also been persisting around the entire comic book and also may hint at a clue as well towards this cult. Another element that Peach Momoko is able to wield incredibly well across Ultimate X-Men is subtext. We can see the characters of Mori and Natsu in the background playing basketball, and they have these really subtle reactions towards what's going on with our trio of characters discussing the cult. In fact, in the next issue, or in the next page, some of our characters even call Mori and Natsu out. For instance, Hisako says over on this last panel, "Mori, are you okay?" With the characters hinting. It looks like Mori and Natsu try and leave the conversation really quickly, and we have the characters saying in the background, we have Natsu saying, "It's okay, Mori. It doesn't matter if they know." So as you can see, it seems like Peach Momoko tried to suggest with subtext across this preview of the series that Mori and Natsu know something secret about the overall nature of this mysterious cult and are finally going to hint at it towards the end of this issue of Ultimate X-Men. Really excited about where this series is going next. I love the really bombastic facial expressions and the in-depth and really dark plot involving all these horrors across Japan here. The facial expressions, the colors, and the details are so beautiful. In addition to this issue of Ultimate X-Men, we also have a preview of what's in store for the future. Give me just a moment and we will take a look at the upcoming solicit. We were also able to check out this issue on a previous stream, but I am so interested to finally see Surge and Maystorm come to battle in November over at Marvel in Ultimate X-Men issue 9. This one's still written and illustrated by Peach Momoko. Let's check out the solicit to see what else we can learn about their confrontation. Maystorm versus Surge in a static skirmish. Lightning collides as Maystorm and Surge finally confront each other, but when Surge is left weak and drained of her power, Maystorm has even more questions and must investigate the mysterious cult Surge is a part of and its relationships with the mutants of the Marvel Ultimate Universe. There we go. We have so many plot revelations housed just within this solicit alone. We have absolute confirmation that Surge is part of the mysterious cult that the Shadow character may also belong to. And we have a tease as well that Surge is also going to be drained of her power in a future Ultimate X-Men issue. Hopefully this comic book should give way to so many different plot revelations. And I'm also really wondering at this point if Surge knows more about the Maker's Council than she's letting on. In a previous issue of Ultimate X-Men, I saw her display some animosity towards Sunfire, who I believe is also involved in the Maker's Council. So there is tons of additional content that Surge is hiding from the rest of these Ultimate X-Men cast members, and I can't wait to see what it is. So that's going to be our Ultimate X-Men content over for today. Next up, we're going to go ahead and head into the main X-Men content proper here. Give me just a few moments. Okay, so right now, Marvel Comics is at full speed in terms of their From the Ashes launch over for the X-Men. In previous weeks, we finally got the flagship Uncanny X-Men series. Now that that comic book is out, I've seen various other From the Ashes titles reference them again and again and again. Here is the upcoming issue of X-Men Chapter 3, which also references not only Uncanny X-Men, but dives really deep into some of the politics surrounding Cyclops and his location right now over in Merle, Alaska. Of course, he's been operating this abandoned Sentinel factory with a really interesting team of X-Men characters like Magneto, a rebooted Beast, as well as Quentin Quire. The character of Agent Ludwig is said to be introduced in this issue, and I believe is going to introduce some political intrigue with the rest of the government towards Cyclops as well. So I think there is tons of interesting material here for the main X-Men series, I'm also interested to see how they're going to start referencing Uncanny X-Men as well. Let's go ahead and see what Jed MacKay and Ryan Stegman are bringing for the third chapter of their brand new X-Men comic. Scott Summers versus the United States of America. How did the X-Men come to possess their headquarters, the factory, and how difficult a position does that put them in? As Cyclops meets the implacable Agent Ludwig, the X-Men come to find their new home may not be as secure as they thought. Man, when I first saw some of these X-Men credits pages for the From the Ashes, it really made me worried because it seems so sort of retro. And I was wondering if the From the Ashes line was just going to be like a greatest hits of what's happened in the past of X-Men. But I think almost each and every one of these books has done a pretty phenomenal job bringing the plot forward and introducing a ton of plot threads. In fact, I want to go ahead and check out this recap as well to hear how they're able to summarize the past 2 issues of our new X-Men series. Tracing another aberrant adult X-gene activation to San Francisco, Cyclops and the rest of the X-Men found a mutant named Ben Liu in the midst of an alien invasion. While battling the aliens, the team realized that they were actually fighting illusions subconsciously created by Ben's mutant ability to warp reality. Man, X-Men issue 2 was absolutely phenomenal. I love the realization of the new mutant and his reality warping powers. The idea that that much plot was also tackled in the scope of 1 issue of X-Men was also a ton of fun here too. After faking Ben's death, the X-Men returned with him to the factory, their new headquarters in Alaska. There they began to delve into the mystery of Ben's mutant activation. In addition to having like a done-in-one plot line, there's also a really interesting reference to the fact that there's some element of a Ben's X gene that's going to affect future issues of X-Men 2. X-Men 3, written by Jed MacKay, art Ryan Stegman, inks J.P. Mayer and Livesey, colors from Marte Gracia, letters from VC's Clayton Cowles, cover from Ryan Stegman, J.P. Mayer and Marte Gracia, design from Jay Bowen. Here we immediately, from like the very first panel, get a glimpse at Cyclops discussing a conversation with Rogue in terms of Uncanny X-Men. So really feels like Marvel's editorial and Jed MacKay are weaving the plot threads of Uncanny X-Men towards this adjectiveless series that really functions as a spearhead for so much of the current X-Men continuity here. Cyclops makes a remark how Rogue has the title of Rogue in her name, Anna Marie, and that character is certainly living up to her code name here. And then he actually finds himself in a conversation with the character of Beast, discussing some of the future plans for Gambit, Jubilee, and Logan from the main Uncanny X-Men series. Also, for me, it's super interesting that Cyclops is having this conversation with the character of Beast, who did so many war crimes in the main X-Force series, even though some of his continuity has now been rebooted in the main X-Men series. Also, it's interesting to see what Cyclops is doing in this vehicle. He's not just having a conversation with the character of Rogue, but he's actually headed towards a political confrontation with the character of Agent Ludwig. He's even able to check in over with Chief Robbins, who we met in the first issue, who was previewing some of the elements of Cyclops' factory too. So I'm loving just how cohesive so much of the continuity is across these X-Men books. One kind of negative thing I have to say here is I do think that some of Cyclops' dialogue is still a little bit on the nose in this issue. The way that he calls out Anna Maria and says that she's sort of living up to her name is a little bit cheesy. And once again, I don't quite think that Jerry Duggan wrote Cyclops the same way. But when I look at it from a more macro level, I think that's more of a sort of minor criticism. And I think overall here, the line is headed in an interesting direction. I think the idea of Cyclops going into this diner to confront Agent Ludwig sits really nicely with the way that Jerry Duggan wrote the character towards the end of the Krakoa comics too. I love Agent Ludwig's first line. He says, "Yeah, that's how it's going to be. You made me look bad in front of the entire country, Summers. We can see that this is somebody really petty who has an in-force Cyclops that isn't willing to listen to nearly anything he has to say. Already, I think these preview pages have been absolutely stunning. Marvel actually slotted one more really interesting conversation here between the character of Magneto and Temper. Temper is a new-ish character towards the rest of the X-Men characters. She's been on the fringes of the line in comic books like Wolverine and the X-Men, but watching her engage with the conversation with Magneto for me is almost like a breakthrough. This is a really new character who hopefully will have a bright future as an X-Men character, and I'm also a little bit interested with how sort of dark their relationship is going to get with Magneto here. Magneto references Temper's name over and over again. I want to go ahead and read what he has to say about it. Temper, so named because you cannot be burned by fire or ice, but only made stronger like glass, like steel. And you have been tempered, haven't you? Temper says back, I have, as you well know, with Magneto stating, I know what it means to be tempered by tragedy, and as you know, heat, I know steel. I love the way that Magneto is able to compare some of his origins with Temper here. This gaze, this transfixed look that he has from Ryan Stegman is absolutely phenomenal. I'm not always the biggest fan of Ryan Stegman's super exaggerated line, but as I look through some of these pages, I see that he's able to carry so much emotion for these characters and nearly immerse me in every single page. Moving forward, I would love to see Stegman refine his line a little bit more, but the character acting on these opening pages of X-Men is tremendous. I had a ton of fun just now looking at that X-Men issue. I want to see what the future holds for the main X-Men title as well. Perfect. Okay. This is a look at the upcoming X-Men issue 7, written by Jed MacKay. And this one actually features artwork from Netho Diaz as opposed to Ryan Stegman. The cover is still illustrated by Ryan Stegman. My guess as to who this character is the Sentinel teased at the end of the first issue of the main adjectiveless X-Men comic book. Let's go ahead and check out our solicit here. The Iron Knight. What does the town of Merle, Alaska owe the X-Men? Where did the defunct Sentinel looming over the town come from? And, more importantly, what is it after? Man, the idea of Marvel resurrecting this Sentinel and waging it against some of these X-Men characters is a really interesting concept. I wonder if any of the hurt feelings from Krakoa and the X-Men losing their home, their island nation paradise, is going to come into play too here. Loving the overall direction of the X-Men line and hope we get to see more very personal stories like this for the X-Men in the near future. Also very excited about what Netho Diaz could be bringing to the main X-Men line. I believe we last saw him on X-Men Era of Apocalypse, and I really love some of the black and white artwork for the book. Once again, like kind of similar to Ryan Stegman, I wish Netho Diaz's line was a little bit more straight, but he's so good at character acting and should be a great follow-up to what Ryan Stegman brought in some recent issues of X-Men 2. So frankly, I think there's a ton to be excited for in the near future in terms of X-Men. So before we got on stream today, I did something that I've been meaning to do for such a long time. I had the distinct pleasure to catch up on the main Venom series, written by Al Ewing, featuring artwork from people like Kafu and a litany of other artists at this time. I have just been so enamored with the way that Al Ewing has really taken the overly violent, extremely dramatic nature of Venom, and has really implemented so many fascinating like science fiction elements, and has featured so many different versions of Eddie Brock throughout time. This comic book is so magical. It's everything I've wanted them to do with this character. I haven't always done the best job covering it, but at least we will continue to talk about it over on our streams. I have no idea what the publisher is cooking up with this all new Venom series. I believe it's coming out at the end of the Venom War. I am so excited to learn more. Let's go ahead and see what Adventures in Poor Taste has to say about our all new Venom. This one written by David Brooke. All new Venom to kick off in December 2024. When the dust settles on Eddie and Dylan's symbiote heavy brawl, the Venom symbiote will have a new human to call its own. Marvel Comics revealed via Polygon new series All New Venom is kicking off this December from Al Ewing and Carlos Gomez. Carlos Gomez, really wonderful and very stylistic artist. Excited to see what he's going to bring aboard this new Venom book. The new series will feature a new host for the Venom symbiote with a murder mystery permeating the first story arc. Ewing told Polygon the first series will be a lot more fun, and it's his first official solo take on the character. If people have a strong hankering for something different from me, this is that. It's almost more like a Spider-Man level story. This is even more fun for me than Al Ewing just taking on a regular Spider-Man comic book. I know Al Ewing loves to write comic books with huge premises and with tons of ambition, and I think that this project should match some of his strengths as a writer. All right, so what is this all new Venom comic book about? Let's see here. Okay, when the dust settles on Eddie and Dylan's symbiote heavy brawl, the Venom symbiote will have a new human to call its own. Okay, who is under the goo is a mystery Dylan will have to solve in gumshoe mode. The book will introduce 4 suspects. Oh, interesting. We have Robbie Robertson, who's coming in from recent issues of The Amazing Spider-Man, as well as Madame Mask. That was a major player in terms of Marvel's recent gang war. Also, Rick Jones, character we've seen across the Marvel Universe so many times, and Luke Cage as well. And as Ewing put it in an interview with Polygon, there are plenty of reasons why any one of them could be the one slinging across New York City. Here's a quote from Al Ewing. It is set on Earth, very much in the normal New York City. Everywhere we go in the story is a place you could go, or at least the type of place you could go. Obviously, when we get to a warehouse, well, I do have a tendency to look up actual warehouses and then change them just enough to pass legal. I always wonder how writers name some of like the fictional locations, and that totally makes sense. Everywhere we go in this story is a natural place you can go in New York City. This is one of the things I really liked about Uncanny Spider-Man. I felt like I could trace some of the places in New York City that comic book was set in. It was also a really twisted and unnerving, realization of the Amazing Spider-Man property, just like this all-new Venom comic book is, even though of course, it's centered around Venom and not Spider-Man. Right now, in terms of the main Venom war, Eddie Brock and his son Dylan are going to war across the comic book with this interesting vision that they've got about future timelines. Each of these individual parties is worried with, what these characters are going to do with some of the Venom suits, and have broken out into this massive symbiote-based war across Marvel's publishing line. Let's go ahead and preview what Marvel has in store for future issues of Venom. Give me just a couple moments. Okay, Tevya, I couldn't get into Ultimate X-Men. It's really boring. Oh my goodness, my heart. Tevya, no. I think you should stick with it. I think when we see the Ultimate X-Men team up with Spider-Man, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, I think when the Ultimate characters also go up against the Makers Council, it's going to be a total trip. It's going to be like, watching like young Stranger Kids or Stranger Things kids fight like these supernatural entities. It's going to be really, really interesting. And then Tevye also says the Venom book is super confusing, in my opinion. I think that's fair, but I think they've done a really good job in terms of like long term plotting. If you're confused with Venom and you haven't started from the first issue, you should, because I think it takes a while to get introduced to ideas and concepts like Meridius, the Garden of Time, and so many of these time displaced versions of Eddie Brock that are running around the Marvel universe. But my God, is this comic book good? I give you my full endorsement for everything that's going on with the Venom book. Give me just a moment, and then we're actually going to look at the new solicit. Marvel's publishing so much product for the Venom War. It's insane. There's even a Jeff issue. Okay, so here's a preview of Venom issue 39. This one is so intriguing as it features this older version of Eddie's son Dylan, as well as the character of Loki. And this cover over from Kafu makes these two individuals look incredibly hyper detailed and stylized. I am so intrigued to check out the solicit over on Venom issue 39. This one is written by Torun Grönbeck, who's also written some really tremendous issues of a Carnage. Also, has also done some great work in terms of Realm of X and previous issues of Venom. And also, Kafu is such an incredible artist. I love it whenever he does interiors. This cover, frankly, I think is beautiful enough. Venom's time quest comes to an end. Old Man Venom's quest through time has brought him to places he's never imagined he'd go. This time taking an audience with the god of lies. That's right, you can never go wrong making a deal with Loki, especially in his most evil form. Will this be the end of Dylan Brock for good? One of the things that's really popping out to me about this issue of Venom is the fact that Torun Grönbeck has done so many things with Asgard in the past. Torun Grönbeck's Realm of X comic book dealt with some of those elements, and just the idea of her implementing some of these aspects of the Thor universe with Loki over with Venom in the middle of the Venom War is insane. This is how I love seeing people work with Marvel continuity, and I am thrilled to check out with this one. I feel like this issue is going to be just as insane as the last issue of Venom, detailing Eddie and Dylan's armies going up against each other, as well as some of the other disparate like symbiote holders that are working alongside Eddie, like characters like Brent, who Torun Grönbeck also worked with in some previous issues of Venom 2. Frankly, we have other Venom issues that are also being published this month. Let's look at the main Venom War solicit 2. Let's see. So it looks like the Venom War is set to conclude in November. This is the 4 of 5 issues, also written by Al Ewing, featuring artwork from Iban Coelho. Venoms versus Zombiotes. As the war for control of the Venom symbiote rages, the threat of the Zombiote hordes has only grown, and now it is impossible to ignore. But that doesn't mean the war is over. In this issue, another contender for champion is taken off the board. Okay, so who do we have here? I'm thinking this is probably the character of Eddie, because we have Dylan as Codex in the foreground of this cover. Also, we have Flash Thompson, who is currently the bearer of the anti-Venom symbiotes. Right now, Marvel's current roster of symbiotes is so interesting in this like future generation of the publisher. We now have Black Widow with the symbiote, like working together alongside Flash Thompson to take out characters like Carnage. We already referenced the fact that Dylan is working alongside the character of Bren, who has the Toxin symbiote. Dylan is also working alongside Norman Osborn's grandson, Normie, who I believe has another symbiote as well and has been deemed the Red Goblin. So I love the idea that Marvel is continuing to use their younger version of symbiote wielders and merging them together with whatever is going on with Eddie's like time displaced Guardian of Time wielders of the symbiotes too. Really, really interesting stuff here. Let's check out the last issue of the Venom War that is also set to reveal the all-new Venom character. This one also written by Al Ewing, featuring art from Iban Coelho. Who is the last Venom standing? There is just one battle remaining in the war for control of the Venom symbiote, and the victory leaves both host and symbiote forever changed. The time is nigh to end the war, decimate all the forces arrayed against them, and set the stage for an all-new Venom, the likes of which no one has ever seen. Yeah, I don't know if I have a solid idea or even guess right now as to who the all-new Venom could be. I'm wondering if some of the later issues of the Venom War are going to detail that mystery in a little bit more depth. One thing to say about this comic book that I'm really excited about is where Meridius is in terms of the main series. The idea that he's working with like a company conspiring against Eddie and Dylan and the Venom symbiote is really intriguing. Also, I kept trying to turn my nose up at the fact that Peter Parker is getting his black symbiote again, mainly because I really hate the fact that the symbiote isn't referenced in the main Amazing Spider-Man series. But I do think Al Ewing was able to write a really compelling reason as to why Peter got the symbiote, and as opposed to like Eddie and Dylan. So I'm really interested to see where that plot thread goes. I'm curious if Amazing Spider-Man is even going to reference it, and just wherever the Venom War is headed next. I think so many previous issues of Venom have been great. I think it's probably one of the top 5 comic books at Marvel right now. Maybe one last thing I wanted to say about it is I wonder how much longer Al Ewing is going to stay on the main Venom book. I feel like he's invented so much continuity, so many new ideas for the character. I'd be happy to read his Venom as long as he's publishing it, but I wonder realistically if he has a year, 2 years, 3 years, or just however much longer he's got left. I know right now he's also been working with the co-writer Toran Gronbeck. I think she's done a really phenomenal job with almost every single issue she's written of Venom too. So the future looks bright for this line. I'm thrilled to check out the main book. I'm thrilled to check out all new Venom. I can't wait to see what Toran Gronbeck does. This franchise for me is just winning. Just like, X-Men, Spider-Man, and Ultimate X-Men 2. All right, let's go ahead and wind down our stream for today. Per usual, we're going to check out the X-Men Monday from Adventures in Poor Taste. This one should be a lot of fun. It looks like one of the main X-Men writers, Gail Simone, is headed back to talk a little bit about Uncanny X-Men 2. There's a lot going on right now in Uncanny X-Men. I love the preview or the first couple pages of the issue detailing the mysterious character of Dr. Ellis raiding the X-Men's mansion. Towards the end of the first issue, we got the preview of these brand new Outliers characters that they were even talking about in X-Men 3. It's pretty interesting, too, that Gambit has kind of reignited his relationship with Rogue on a main X-Men team. And I'm wondering what kind of threat Rogue is getting into in this mysterious, intense upcoming cover. Incredible design here from Adventures in Poor Taste on that logo, too. That's great. This one written by Chris Hassan, X-Men Monday 263, Gail Simone talks Uncanny X-Men. We also have preview pages for the second issue, too. Welcome, X-fans, to another uncanny edition of X-Men Monday at Adventures in Poor Taste. This one's truly uncanny because Gail Simone, writer of the all-new Uncanny X-Men series, is this week's guest. As there are so many new voices contributing to Marvel's From the Ashes X-Men line, a lot of creators are making their first X-Men Monday appearances. But did you know this isn't Gail Simone's first time talking mutants with me? Gail Simone's first appearance was all the way back in 2019's X-Men Monday 24. Oh my goodness, that's a long time ago. The same day this edition goes live, August 19th. Wild, right? Anyway, Gil and I chatted about Domino and, of course, Cyclops at Fan Expo Boston 2019. So if you missed it the first time, give it a read for a little more Gale. I like the idea that Gail Simone at least has been cognizant of the X-Men, and especially with some of the ancillary characters like Domino. Back in the present, you've read Uncanny X-Men 1, you loved it, and you want to see what Gail has to say about the series to come, so let's get started. Welcome back to X-Men Monday, Gail. Before we discuss Uncanny X-Men 1, I have to say, you seem to be having the time of your life. Comic fans don't get much more passionate and opinionated than X fans. Yet, you've made yourself so available to them and respond with respect and candor. I know you're only one issue into your Uncanny X-Men run, but where does this experience rank in your comics career? Gail says, I'm having a great time, and you have to remember this issue was written months ago. So I've been anticipating it getting out into the world and everyone seeing David Marquez's art and having it all come together for quite a few months. So having it finally come out is super exciting. And I do feel like this is a pinnacle experience for me just because I'm writing a book that really affected me as a young preteen because it took place all over the world. Anybody could be a mutant, anybody could be a hero, and unlike the Justice League, which I also love, and I was particularly fascinated by Wonder Woman at that age. You don't have to be from Krypton or an Amazon princess, you can literally be from anywhere. Your neighbor could be a hero, or you could be a hero. That idea is just absolutely golden, and it's a blast to work in that space. Be able to visit existing X-Men and create some new ones that reflect modern times and youths of our era. This is such a tremendous page. I think it shows off the really detail-oriented nature that David Marquez takes to so much of his X-Men comics. Also, there's just some way that he's able to craft the facial expressions for the character that makes his art seem so like hyper-realistic and modern, even though it has this really interesting and beautiful fantasy element. Let's go straight from those positive feelings to discussing Karina Ellis. Speaking as somebody who loves the X-Men, Warden Ellis seems quite terrible. But in the tradition of many iconic X-villains, readers find there's more to Ellis than meets the eye over time. I was so taken aback from Dr. Ellis, I actually went back to X-Men 35 and started reading Dr. Ellis's cameo appearance in that issue. It was really intriguing how so many of Dr. Ellis's colleagues sort of talk down to her and refer to her as a podcast host instead of a really like ambitious and detail-oriented scientist here. Gail says there's a lot more to her and the story will unfold over time, but she definitely doesn't hate mutants. That's an intriguing element too. I don't know if we like firmly know that within the scope of the dialogue either. It's not so much that she's looking for a few to come over to her side, and I just kind of want to leave it at that. How she goes about it might be quite terrible. She did do some horrible things in terms of the X-Men's mansion. She mentioned that she's really trying to destroy things and really be a thorn in the side for the rest of the X-Men characters. To me, the thing about Dr. Ellis that makes her so interesting is I'm wondering if she's going to be quite as persistent as Mother Righteous was during Krakoa. That character was such an interesting schemer, and really just watching her conspire against the X-Men for like years across the publishing line was so much fun, and I hope we have a similar relationship with Dr. Ellis moving forward. This week's first question comes from Sophie Cafe, who noted Uncanny X-Men was written from Rogue's point of view. Ooh, I don't know if I caught up on that. That's such a good thing to mention. Sophie was wondering if Rogue will remain the series narrator or if it would shift depending on the story. I hope Gail shifts the narrator for each issue. I think it would make things a lot more interesting. In Uncanny X-Men, Rogue is definitely the glue of this book, so we will see a lot of things from her point of view. She's one that we're experiencing this through. However, she will be in other locations, so there will be issues that focus on other characters. That means there may be times where there's less of it, but it's still the glue of the book. I'll be real, I'm a little disappointed in that answer. I think Rogue is a super interesting character, but I would love to get an issue from like Gambit's perspective, Wolverine's perspective, maybe from some of those Outliers characters too. I think they're just way more interesting because they're newer to continuity. X-Fan Meg Belmont admires you for being an influential woman in such a male-dominated and misogyny-filled space. Meg says, thank you very much. Okay, so I like Gail Simone's response. She says, it's so much less now, and then laughs. I'm really happy to hear her say that. I know comic books can be super male dominated. I know, like, for me too, like, I have trouble with this. If you don't have, like, the popular, resounding opinion, there's tons of people who are going to go and say things against that without really, like, explaining themselves. I know this isn't similar to what Gail Simone is facing, and, Gail Simone likely has so much more adversity, with me being, like, a male creator. That being said, though, I'm so happy to hear Gail say that there's less animosity in terms of comic book fans with female creators and hopefully even female characters here. Meg wants to know what your favorite things are about Rogue and Gambit as a couple and individuals. Gail says, there's quite a few things. One is that it feels like they're each a sign of the same thing and that both of them had had lives before the X-Men and they were kind of brought in and rehabilitated through the X-Men, so they have that experience. I was wondering if Gail was going to give like a super like cookie cutter answer to this question, but the idea that she's drawing upon some of the past character experiences to comment on where Gambit and Rogue are at right now is just a great way to explain that answer and also give some more context as to how she approaches characterization for the X-Men comics. Gail says, I think they're a super hot couple together. Yeah, that's what I was expecting her to say. Let's be real. Let's be real. Okay, she also says, a lot of people agree with me, it turns out. They're like the Lois and Clark or Peter and MJ of the X-Men. I just think they fit really well together. They have common interests, beliefs, and are super sexy. David Marquez just knocks it out of the park with all that stuff, with all their powers, action, intimacy, and the hotness. People are tweeting me all the time little panels of his with a million hearts after. It's so cute. X-Men Hank is interested in hearing more about the comparison you made between Rogue, Cyclops, and Professor Xavier and Magneto. What more can you tease about these two and their potential conflict about their upcoming teams? Yeah, we've gotten to see this a lot in almost each X-Men book, especially in the upcoming issue of X-Men. There's tons of reference towards what Cyclops is doing right now in Alaska. I think one of the first melding of these stories between books is going to be with X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. This is fascinating. This is really what we're here for, is to hear how the From the Ashes continuity is going to start connecting. We are going to see Cyclops and Rogue are in complete opposite sides of Xavier's dream, and they're butting heads about it. It's going to be a lot more dramatic, I think, than what people are expecting. Their viewpoints are just so different on how they want to carry on his legacy. It's going to be very powerful. I don't want to give away too much because we don't want to get into the details of their differences, but it's such a huge difference in ideology. Yeah, these are the two biggest books in terms of From the Ashes, and they're already setting up a big confrontation. I can't remember which post-credits page it was in, but we already got a preview that there's going to be something big upcoming between Rogue and Cyclops. One interesting thing to note right now about maybe Cyclops' current headspace is that Magneto is actually on his team in the Factory. So I wonder if maybe Cyclops is going to be more closely aligned with Magneto while Rogue takes on Professor Xavier's ideals. I'm just excited. I feel like that's going to be a big storyline with a ton of plot ramification. I wonder if it's going to be an event storyline or just something massive featured on the fringes of these X-Men books. This is also reminding me to a certain degree of the Schism storyline that pit Wolverine against Cyclops, but I hope it's written a lot better than that story and has a greater sense of resolution too. Is that what it's like between you and Jed McKay in the X office? I'm glad to hear Gail's answer. She says she doesn't have a blood feud with Jed yet. There isn't a poster up of you and Jed back to back. Oh, just like Rogue and Cyclops in that preview page. Gail says no, but we have this huge Discord where we are all talking pretty much every day. So there are just so many conversations going on and coordinating everything in there that we feel like we're best friends or brother and sister or something. I'm so happy to hear that. These comic books have like so many similar characters and themes. They are not going to be as good if they're all written in a vacuum. I'm really happy to hear that Gail and Jed are talking all the time on Discord or whatever it is they're talking to each other through. X-Fan Applej Jackie was very intrigued by Marcus and the secret house from Gambit's past. Ooh, another detail I may have overlooked here. We'll be getting some more backstory on Remy's childhood or past in general as your story unfolds. Gail says yes immediately, and it will take a bit. First off, Remy ran away when he was young, and the only one that would take him in was Marcus and his wife Alice. They were saying they welcome all orphans. It doesn't matter where they come from, what ethnicity they are, any of that. They're all welcome as long as they don't hurt each other. So that is his safe haven house. We'll learn a lot more about their family as we go along. Marcus is definitely based on someone who did survive a hurricane, so we deal with that a bit in his first story arc as well. Yeah, I didn't know that this was introduced in this issue of X-Men. I thought this was some like really deep-rooted lore that I somehow missed out on. While we're talking about Gambit, how does it feel to be Remy's writer while Wolverine and Deadpool is dominating the box office? Gail says, I was talking to Tom Brevoort before I was ready to go to the premiere, and he said, I'm not going to the premiere, but I've already seen it, and you're going to love it. And I was like, what is he referring to? And when I saw the film, I realized what he thought I would love. And I did. It was hilarious. I just like all the attention Gambit's been getting right now. Thank God, Gail Simone has a pretty strong plot thread with Gambit hinted at in the first issue of Uncanny X-Men, where he takes the Eye of Agamotto from the dragon Saturang. It's a good time to be in the Gambit business. Indeed, indeed. Gail says, you're going to learn a lot more about him in this book, and he's had a bit of a power-up in some things going on with him. I'm excited for that all to unfold. As are Gambit's fans, I'm sure. X-fan Ed Young said Uncanny X-Men 1 was an absolutely amazing first issue and all he wanted from an X-Men comic. Ed's a science writer and wrote a feature in 2019 about Endlings. Ooh, the Endlings were kind of the villain featured in the background, in the subtext of the first issue of Uncanny X-Men. I think there were at least 2 characters that hinted at the mysterious Endling villains. These are individual animals who are the last surviving member of the species. Word is that one of the most beautiful and tragic that Ed knows of. And not one to ask for spoilers, but he's curious if the new character concept for the Endling reflects that scientific usage. Now some of the plot is starting to come together with me a little bit more. We've been looking at that upcoming cover for an issue of Uncanny X-Men where Rogue is in the middle of a forest, I believe, and there's a mysterious set of eyes and arms looking back at her, and it looks like it could potentially be one of these Endling villains teased at. Gail says that some of these Endling characters do have some grounding in science. I'm not a scientist, but I have read up on this a bit, and I would love to read his paper if I could get a hold of it. It's kind of like a songbird is putting out all of their call repeatedly, and no one is answering that call because they're the last songbird, the last one of its species, and we have that going on in this book, and that will unfold over time. It's beautiful and tragic and very large and devastating. Okay, interesting teaser at David Marquez drawing these harrowing hands of the Endling reaching out at this poor mutant character. Ed, if you're reading, get Gail that feature. Next, X-fan Mike Lepp was wondering what inspired the invisible disabilities approach for the Outliers. Mike has seen so many people immediately find something to identify in these kids. They haven't really had any page time yet, so it struck a chord with readers. Yeah, the Outliers were introduced towards the very end of the first issue of X-Men, and they've been referenced repeatedly in future comics, not only in future covers of Uncanny X-Men, but I believe even Cyclops made a comment on them in that third issue of X-Men that we checked out. I don't think I've ever cried as much or as often as when I'm getting emails and tweets from this first issue of Uncanny X-Men. Like I said earlier, what attracted me to the X-Men book was that you could be from anywhere and anybody could be a hero. I think dealing with neurodivergence and various other invisible disabilities is something that isn't represented a lot in mainstream comics. And I think that X-Men is the perfect place to have characters and with them because Nightcrawler and Beast. When you look at them, you know they're mutants, right? With these new characters, the Outliers, you don't know necessarily upon first look that they're mutants. I don't think I've heard that idea really be displayed to me in quite the way that it was. I love that approach in this really subtle way that some of these new X-Men characters will be able to take up these more like plain clothes, types of settings and sort of blend into the background while still having that interesting fantasy element in nature to it. We've already talked about how good David Marquez is at drawing some of the facial expressions for these characters, but each and every character here looks interesting and like they have a ton of personality just from these expressions alone. I think that's really struck a chord. Some of the areas in the world that these characters are from struck a chord. I've received amazing emails, got one this morning that made me cry. I had to really get the water out of my eyes before doing this interview because a woman showed her son, who looks about 5 or 6. I could be wrong on the age, but they're from Argentina. And he's looking at a panel of Valentin, and he's saying Valentin has the same color skin as him. It's just beautiful, and the little boy is so thrilled. I think to a certain degree, the X-Men is not really tapping into the full potential of what it can offer as a franchise when it doesn't reflect some of the other, types of people that exist in the world. And I'm happy to hear that Gail Simone is trying to break away from that tradition and get different types of people represented in the X-Men. Then I have that from people from Singapore for Jitter. I'm already being contracted about Singapore ADHD charities and education, so it's really hitting people pretty much in the heart, which makes me feel really good because representation matters. It teaches people things they may not know. It makes other people feel welcome and seen, and it makes interesting stories, and these mutants couldn't be cooler. Yeah, I think this cover speaks for itself. We've gotten so many nice shots of these Outliers characters teamed up together, or moments where they're looking really scared. We finally have a cover showing them all going into battle, looking incredibly ready to fight back against whatever it is they're battling here. I especially love this character and the way that these shadows are kind of emanating from him too. It seems like we're really going to get to know these new characters in Uncanny X-Men 2. We are going to learn more. The way that I'm telling this arc is we learn more about everything as we go along, but we're definitely getting very much into the Outliers and to see what's up with them. We don't know that much right now. We don't really know how their powers work exactly. We don't know if they're on the good or bad side. We just don't know. So we'll be learning this stuff up as we go along. Let's head to the end of this interview. Mission accomplished so far. Is there anything else you'd like to say or tease? Gail says, just a thank you to the people who are getting the word out, to the fans and readers who are supporting it and talking about it. It's really great to see so many people actually having fun and going to a comic book store, even if they get it digitally, just being excited about something and then wanting to know everything right now. You have to wait for this story to unfold. That's part of the fun, but it's just really fun to see people excited and hopefully about something that they can't wait to know what happens. And hopefully we'll be doing that for a long time. Okay, so it looks like Uncanny X-Men 2 is on sale next month on September 11th. We still have some preview pages to look at too before we close out our stream. Okay, so we have Harvey X, the character who was featured in Uncanny X-Men 1, and I believe actually gave us some revelations about the Endlings. Also, the Outliers characters are teased in this very first panel too. Loving this double page spread over from David Marquez also. I can see these characters right off the bat here are picking a fight in terms of Marvel's X-Men. They're going up against Wolverine, and it looks like Gambit is able to stop him with the Eye of Agamotto. I believe her name is Jitter. We finally get to see her manifest some of her super fast powers on the page too. Okay, fantastic. It looks like next up for X-Men Monday, we have Jason Liu discussing the future Dazzler series. I'm also pretty thrilled to go ahead and explore that title also. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming to the stream here. Let's go ahead and just give a recap on what's coming up for next week. So this upcoming Wednesday, we have the latest issue of The Amazing Spider-Man, and we also have a brand new issue of X-Men and Ultimate X-Men. We will be posting our video reviews for those comics this Thursday, and then this upcoming Saturday, we will continue our stream as usual. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and we'll be back next week to see what else Marvel Comics has in store. Thank you one last time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the weekend.